Welcome back to Never Did It. I'm Jake Ziegler, and I'm here with Brad Garoon. On Never Did It, we look back at the last 100 plus years of movie history in an effort to fill in some of our own movie blind spots. Today, we're going all the way back to the year my grandfather was born? No, my grandmother. A long time ago, 1928. We're going to look at a couple of silent films of some regard, one of which was disliked passionately by my co-host Brad Garoon. Do you want to talk about that one first? Get the negatives out of the way?
Yeah, sure, because I don't have too much to say about it outside of the negatives. But first, you recommended this one for me, right?
I did. I recommended The Last Command. As we often say when we go back this far, I don't have a ton of movies that to choose from that I have seen, that you hadn't seen. But I had seen this one. I've mentioned this a couple times before about seeing movies at the Traverse City Film Festival, silent films with a live organ accompaniment, and this was one of those films. So I had very fond memories of seeing that. I love seeing movies that way. I think it's just a neat way to experience it. I mean, I've seen Nosferatu that way. I've seen The General that way. Saw Phantom of the Opera that way, and this one. But it had been 15 years probably since I'd seen it. Thankfully for us, it was on Tubi, and it's also known as being the film Emil Jannings won the first Oscar for Best Actor for this film, as well as a movie called The Way of All Flesh, because that first year they allowed multiple performances on a single nomination. So it had some things going for it, and it's pretty highly regarded. I mean, if you look on Letterboxd, it's got an average score of 4. It doesn't have a ton of ratings, but I mean, it's got over 1,700 people who rated it 4 stars, and you do not share that sentiment.
So I have a few things to respond to. That you brought up a lot of stuff, a lot of things I want to address, but tell us what it's about first.
A lot of it's told in flashback sense. It's a movie about an older Russian guy who at this point is trying to be an actor in the Hollywood movies, and he goes there dressed in his military gear, so he's trying to be this actor. But then the movie flashes back to his time of when he's like the cousin of the Russian Tsar, and he was a general in the army, and fought in all these wars, and that's a good chunk of what the flashback is. And then the movie comes back around to the present day, shows what he is able to end up doing in the movies. A lot of flashback in it, but it's also, again, it's pretty short. It's only about 90 minutes of the movie. I felt like it kind of got in and got out relatively quickly. Had a lot of the big war scenes in that middle, but the beginning and the end, I think, are really that's the heart of the movie. I even saw this in your letterbox review. That's the heart of the movie, and that's what I kind of took away from the beginning and the ending are really interesting and good.
Yeah, I wish that had been the movie. I really enjoyed that. In the beginning, I was fully pulled in. I thought it was very cool and kind of surprising because I did not realize that William Powell had been a silent movie star. We've covered him before on this podcast when we did Deeds.
My Man Godfrey. He's in The Great Ziegfeld also.
We haven't covered that film, and I've never seen it.
Oh no, I'm sorry, Emil Zola. I was confusing those two.
He's in Emil Zola?
No. He's in The Great Ziegfeld, which is also a Best Picture winner, but it's the Best Picture winner from the year before Life of Emil Zola, and Ziegfeld, Zola, sometimes we did not cover The Great Ziegfeld.
So yeah, I was really into it. I was like, why does Powell's character take such an interest in Jannings' character? And then at the end, because you get this 40-minute flashback of garbage that doesn't really understand what its morals are. The only thing it does serve is to know why Powell would sort of torture Jannings on the set. But man, did I not like the 40-minute flashback. I didn't like that as a structure for this movie. Let me say something that if I were to say it to myself, I would criticize myself. I don't think you need to sympathize with the main character of a movie, but I was very annoyed at the way this movie tried to trick me into sympathizing with Jannings' character. This is a guy who we're told is monstrous, who is in league with his cousin, the Tsar, even as he's critical of the way that the Tsar is conducting the Great War. Russia's part of World War I, while the Russian Revolution is going on. Russian history during this time period in 1917 is fascinating, and it's flattened. And granted, it's a silent movie, and silent movies tend to be pretty simple. And it's a short movie, but it is. That part of history is flattened so much to the Tsar is kind of a jerk and thinks that the soldiers are toys. I was really irritated at how Jannings, number 2 in the Imperial Russian military character, was able to seduce the main rebel, have her sacrifice her own life. I mean, maybe unknowingly, it wasn't clear if she knew the train was going to go off the tracks. But then because of that, it made it look like the train going off the tracks was kind of a joke. And it was done with miniatures in a way that looked really fake. I guess I'm spoiling the shit out of this movie, but it's 100 years old.
It's okay. It's 100 years old, yeah.
And then what really killed me, because I was being drawn back in by the final act of the movie where we're back in Hollywood, and William Powell is psychologically torturing Emil Jannings, who is already so PTSD ridden or shell shocked, to use the parlance of the time. And then in the final scene, Powell reveres Jannings, the man who cucked him and tried to steal his country. And I was just like, this movie sucks. It is doing this because it hates communism. Like, nothing could be worse than communism, even Russian imperialism. And so that, like, to call him a great man at the end of that film just like really rubbed me the wrong way. And I feel like I'm being a little precious, but it didn't do enough to enthrall me to ignore that happened. Like, Mission Impossible Final Reckoning does a lot of like hagiography on Tom Cruise. It's like really like this guy's Jesus basically, but the movie is rocking your ass off that doesn't really matter. And this just didn't rock my ass off in that kind of way.
Yeah, I mean, for 1928, I think it's got some things going. Like the train, obviously, yeah, the train was done with the miniatures or whatever, but I thought that looked relatively good given the constraints of the time. And I think Jannings is very good in it, despite, his personal leanings that we talked about in my
Well, we should,
yeah,
we talked about this on Letterboxd, but we should mention, I don't know if it was personal, but Jannings was the first Best Oscar winner, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And we've praised him and his acting skill on this podcast before, which is deserved. He's very good in this, and he's very good in The Blue Angel. But he was a Nazi propagandist who then couldn't get work after World War II because he made the wrong choice. And a colleague of mine actually listened to that episode of the podcast and then sent me an article about Jannings being a Nazi. And I'm like, I know. The propaganda films he made were like the greatness of Germany stuff. I mean, it's like the Riefenstahl stuff, which is despicable. I mean, like, there's no Nazi defense happening on this podcast.
No.
At all. But I feel okay about the fact that we didn't talk it when we talked about The Blue Angel, and we are talking about it now.
It bears mentioning, but yeah, it's I'm not going to tell anyone not to watch The Last Command if they really want to.
I agree. In fact, I think you can watch like Triumph of the Will if you want to watch a bad movie. Like, it's not like Hitler's getting money for it anymore.
Right. I've always been curious about that. I've never been able to pull the trigger on that one, but I've always kind of wanted to.
It's like long and dumb.
Yeah, that tracks.
It might be like technically very interesting, much in the same way that the next movie we're going to talk about is very technically interesting. But I'll wait to ask, is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of The Last Command?
I'm just on the opposite side of you, but I still rated it a 4 stars just because I love the beginning and the end, despite the William Powell thing. But I also love the William Powell character. I love the way he plays it. So he's very good in it. I didn't dislike the flashback as much as you did. I mean, I was a little, even as a short running time, I was like, yeah, okay, let's get it going a little bit. But I still enjoyed the movie. Like I said, the performances are strong, and you've got a good beginning and a good end that overcame the deficiencies of the middle. So
sure. To 4 stars though, I mean, come on, man.
I think a lot of that still is also, like I said, I've positive memories of seeing it at the film festival with friends and at the live accompaniment and everything. Like, it just I think I had some of that creeping in to my rating too. But also, 4 stars is the most common rating on Letterboxd, so I'm not alone.
Doesn't make it right.
It is right. I'm looking at it right now.
No, I mean, it doesn't make it morally right. I wanted to just make a few more jokes about the fact that like Evelyn Brent's character was going to shoot Jannings' character and then didn't for no real reason. Instead, I'll pivot off your comment about the live accompaniment, because what could have used live accompaniment? The crowd. Because the music that Shoreline Entertainment put over... it's interesting because I was reading up on this movie. I read that in 1989, I think it was 1989, Carl Davis did a score for the movie. But I can't imagine that is the version that's on YouTube on Tubi, because it's so bad. The music that is on this movie, it's like so inappropriate for each scene. It seems like it was irrelevant or totally done with no regard for the content of the scenes. And Shoreline Entertainment is the distribution company for both this and The Last Command on Tubi, but the music in The Last Command was not garbage. So I would like to now see the crowd in a theater with a live organ, because it would make the movie a lot better. Because the one thing, so I haven't rated this on Letterboxd yet because I finished watching it like 2 hours ago.
Oh, okay.
But I would give it 3.5 stars, and I found a lot of it very interesting. This movie I recommended for you because it's very influential. If you watch it, you'll be like, oh, I'm watching a David Lynch film, or I'm watching one of the more punishing Martin Scorsese films. It's a movie that doesn't have a lot of terror or hardship in it, but where it does, it lingers with it. Like, it makes you sit with it for a long time. There's a child's death. You watch her parents watch her die, and then you sit with her parents as they completely break down after her death. And the movie is not like tonally that way, so it hits you even harder when it happens. And it's in the middle of a joyous thing that happened, and it's really gnarly. Yeah, so I just had read, I'd never seen it, but I had read that it was very influential and it was highly regarded, so I thought it would be an interesting one to watch. And it was. So basically what this movie is about is a guy whose father deems him a future president of the United States and really instills that idea in him. And then he turns out to just be an idiot, but an idiot with a big ego. and you just get annoyed by him the entire movie. The other characters in the movie finally start calling him a windbag, so you realize you're not being gaslit into thinking this is a great man. And it's just like how his life falls apart because he makes bad decisions, is impulsive, and is probably dumb. And yeah, I liked it because, for one thing, it's shot in a very interesting way. It was directed by King Vidor, who I'd never seen a movie by him before.
I thought I hadn't, but then when I looked up his list, I have seen some movie with Barbara Stanwyck called, and I want to say it was with Professor Steve Lipkin, who I talked about last week. I think he showed Stella Dallas with Barbara Stanwyck, so I think that was the only other one that I'd seen before this. And again, that was 20 years ago in college.
So anyway, what did you think of The Crowd?
I loved this movie, actually. I thought it was really interesting. I mean, musical issues aside, and for me, I just turned my hearing aid volume down a little bit. So I was like, I know there's nothing really going on here that I need to hear. So yeah, the music was definitely strange on the Tubi version, but I think the performances are really strong, and the narrative is, again, really interesting, especially, I keep harping on this, like, it almost feels contemporary in a lot of ways, just with the way this couple struggles. I mean, there's no, like, idealism, really, in this movie. I mean, it's pretty much struggle from day one, because this guy, I mean, he's got a job, he works at a firm, but, he's just kind of a lower level, entry level guy, and he's got a friend who moves up in the company faster than he does, and he's just one of these guys like, oh, I've got a big thing coming. He's always thinking he's got the next big thing coming, and his poor wife, puts up with it for only so long. But he's mean to her, and he's critical of her. He takes out his insecurities on her, and other. But like I said, I thought those were two good performances, and the way it's shot, there's some really cool things about the way it's shot. Like I love the one where he was thinking of, or no, it was him, it was the guy. He was thinking about something, and they just kind of superimposed what he was thinking, like kind of on his forehead, like that, which is a really cool effect for the time.
That David Lynch went on to steal a lot.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm sure others have too. If we really thought about it, you could find more of that. But there's all these little kind of cool touches like that I really liked. And I loved the design of the apartment, the way everything was like, the bed had to be folded up, and then this had to be folded. Like everything was just so like small and cramped. And, anytime that there was even just a little bit of happiness for him, he would blow it. It was hard to root for him, but
you're not rooting for him.
Not rooting for him, but I wanted something good to happen for the woman. So like, I almost kind of rooted for him because she's stuck by him for so long. It's like I was almost kind of rooting for him because I wanted it for her, not so much for him, because he doesn't really deserve it so much. But the one thing I will say in his defense, at least as far as what they showed in the movie, is that he did seem to be a good father and was interested in his children.
No, in the beach, a very pivotal scene on the beach where the mom is doing all the work of putting this picnic together. She cuts her finger on a can, and all she wants him to do is to pay attention to the kids. So he walks over and he takes the son and he walks away and he keeps playing his ukulele, and then the son grows bored of the ukulele, so he walks away. So then he walks back and he gets the baby and they walk away, and then the baby gets bored of the kid, so the kids go and play sandcastle. But meanwhile, the son is like running in circles while the mom yells at him because he's kicking sand on the cake, and the dad can't be bothered to do anything about it. And then the fire goes out. He doesn't do anything about that until she screams at him, and then he burns himself like a little baby, and she has to put butter on his fingers. I mean, he literally doesn't do anything ever. That was a scene where I was like, fuck this guy.
He does horseback rides for the kids though in that scene too. That's like
after
the one thing
she begs him to do something. I mean, he's 100% a man-child. I hated him so much, and I realized I was hating the movie until I came around to like, the movie is different than what I thought it was, and I'm glad that it's actually where I think it should be. And yeah, the production design, you mentioned the apartment that's really cool, and then opposite that, where he works, is enormous, and you see
that
like
shot when they're just zooming in kind of on that whole cool. Like that's awesome. Yeah.
If you've seen Brazil, I mean, Brazil is 100% pulling from that. Terry Gilliam loves that kind of stuff. You see that stuff over and over again. Later, when he's selling vacuums door to door, the way that basically little boxes on a hillside, that's Edward Scissorhands and Tim Burton. There's so much cool that's come from this amazing production design. And he sold this to the studio as an experimental film. And you can see that in the numbers over his face that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I have no idea what the original music was. I can't imagine it was anything like the music we heard. Well, maybe he didn't even care. I mean, some of these guys, it's just like whatever the theater wanted to do is what the music was. And my favorite part of the movie, though, is you mentioned, his friend is getting ahead of him faster than him in the place. I love that. First off, his friend is also an idiot, and yet he still advances faster because he's just less of a blowhard than this guy. But my favorite scene is the two connected scenes are he becomes a father. The main character becomes a father, and he gives all his work to his buddy. He goes, when my ship comes in, I'll make it up to you here. And then of course the ship never comes in, and his friend is the one whose ship comes in, and the friend does not do anything to help him when he quits, and then doesn't tell his wife that he's quit.
Yeah, what an idiot. God, there was one line, it was after the tragedy, like we already mentioned, the child died. There was this one title card that came up on there. It said something like, the movie referred to the crowd a lot. Like, it's always like, and the crowd just referring to just like the general people around you and things around you. But there was one title card that came up that said, the crowd will, they'll laugh with you always, but they'll only be sad with you for a day. Or something like that. And that kind of hit me, how it was just like, yeah, like when stuff like that happens, you get that initial round of support, but then where does it go after that? And how much are you getting after that? And I think that was a really interesting aspect to put into that tragedy.
Yeah, the crowd is a character. The crowd is all those schnooks that the main character can't imagine himself being a part of. And that's why the final scene of the movie is such a tragedy. And it goes back to the line you mentioned, and also right around that time, a cop, while the main character is outside telling everyone to be quiet because his daughter's sick, because he's losing his mind. Mm-hmm. And he goes outside and tells, basically, they're in Chicago, I think, by this point, right? The movie starts in New York, and then here, I think they're in Chicago. Yeah. And he's telling basically everyone on the street, you have to be quiet. And this cop comes up to me and he goes, you can't expect the city to be quiet because your child is sick. Go inside. And then at the end of the movie, he's gotten his wife back, and they're at a vaudeville show, and they're laughing, and a guy next to him is laughing, and then it pulls back, and everyone's laughing, and he's just become part of the crowd, which is the great tragedy, and they're all laughing with him, and that when the next tragedy inevitably befalls him because he's awful, they'll only cry with him for a day. It's really interesting. There's a lot of musical interstitials played in the dialogue placards that aren't someone talking.
Yeah,
and they're
I really I thought that was cool. It helped this movie a lot.
It was cool. It was very thematically relevant. And that's another reason why I came to like the movie more as it went on, because you start to see like there's just a lot more going on here than it seems in the beginning, when it almost feels like The Little Rascals. And everything's really like, aw shucks, the dialogues are really stupid. Like, it was interesting to watch this and The Last Command back to back, because if you were to, let's say this was the only movie from 1928 you'd ever seen, you might be tricked into thinking people sounded like morons because the dialogue is so stupid. It's a lot of like, oh, Willikers, and you're not going to razz me, Mataz. And then you watch The Last Command. It's like, no, people spoke normally back then too. But it's heightened, absurd dialogue in the crowd to give you a sort of veneer of white picket fence, guy on the up, a smooth talker, and things like that. And then you just realize like, oh, this is all fake, and none of this is doing anything for him. It's very cool. Actually, it's a 4-star movie. I haven't even put my review on Letterboxd yet. Yeah. So this is a 4-star movie.
I have it at 4.5 just because of all those little intangible things about it too, just like the neat little camera stuff that others have stolen over the years and stuff like that. I mean, it's rare that I'm watching a movie where I see, well, maybe not rare, but like it's cool when I'm watching a movie and I really notice like, wow, that camera, like where I stop and like that was cool, and it's just like a camera movement or something. And that happened to me like probably 4 or 5 times in this movie. Just it's so cool to see people from that era inventing these things that are still used over and over and over again. And like, like Lynch will do things, but he'll put his own little twist on it. And Tarantino steals from everybody and then he puts his twist on it, and that's cool. It's just a really cool, I know a lot of people can't sit through silent movies, but there's just so much cool stuff going on in so many of them.
Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time with it. I've said this on this podcast many times. The comedies work a lot better for me than the dramas, but what you're saying is absolutely right, and it makes me feel stupid. I'm in the theater watching Sinners, and I'm like, oh, Ryan Coogler made a Quentin Tarantino movie, but Quentin Tarantino made an Ang Lee movie, and Ang Lee made a King Vidor movie. It's like it goes back and it goes back and it goes back, and we talk about that sometimes. Like we've talked about the through line between like Fellini to Terry Gilliam to Ari Aster, but to know that, it goes back farther, it goes back farther, it goes back farther. And a lot of this stuff too, there's literary stuff, and there's just things that are influenced by famous photographers and famous artists in general. I mean, we talked about Barry Lyndon recently, like that's all based on visual art, oil paintings, and I'm not up on that. So obviously we don't have any lists for 1928, but where did these two movies land? I
don't have a 28, but I do have a best of the 20s.
Well, actually, sorry, before we get to that, talk to me about the first ever Oscars.
The first ever Oscars, The Last Command. I think actor was the only one that was nominated for. Okay. Yes, The Last Command. Emil Jannings was nominated for that, like I said, along with The Way of All Flesh, and he won that one. And then The Last Command was also nominated for Best Original Story. Did not win that one, yeah. But so it had 2 nominations. The Crowd is another interesting one as well, because King Vidor was nominated for Ceremony. They had 2 directing awards. They had Best Directing for a Comedy Picture, and they had Best Directing for a Dramatic Picture. They each only had 3 nominees in them, so there were 6 nominees total. And then one of them was Charlie Chaplin for The Circus, and it's weird. He had nominations for actor and director, and I think was one other thing, but they just decided to take away those nominations and they gave him like an honorary
Mm.
award just for making The Circus. So at the end of the day, there's really 5 nominees for Best Director that year. King Vidor was one of them, much like we talked about a couple weeks ago when we did Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans, which won the award for Best Unique and Artistic Picture. The Crowd was another nominee in that category, well received at the time, certainly, and certainly also revered still today.
So I'm realizing that I only recently was able to put together a top 10 list of my favorite movies from the 20s. The Last Command does not appear.
Just outside of my top 10 too.
I would say that The Crowd is my number 4, right after Sherlock Jr. and right before The General. So sandwiched right between 2 Buster Keaton movies.
Nice. I have like a top 15 or so from the year because I've seen a few. I have The Last Command. I have at number 11, right in front of The General, and then right behind Wings, the first Best Picture winner. And then I have The Crowd at number 7, just ahead of Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans, and right behind Sherlock Jr.
Thank you for saying the whole thing. I appreciate that. Cool.
Of what, Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans?
Yeah, absolutely. We will be back next week with perhaps stories of our weekend together in northern Michigan and the films of 1986.